Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mark Needham. I'm the EMEA Hybrid Work Lead at Cisco, and I'll be your host and moderator. The topic today is huge. It's the importance of HR in a new workplace, and we'll try and do this thing justice in the next hour. Throughout, we'll be doing some polls and some surveys via Slido. You can either scan the QR code or go to slido.com and use hashtag 4796 to be able to interact with the content and the presenters. So this is our agenda for today. I'm going to start off spending a few moments talking about some of the global trends that we're seeing. Then Adrian's going to take over talking about the lessons we have learned in the last 18 months. And Cisco already had a very mature hybrid working culture. Then Stefan's going to take over to talk a bit about our future strategy for hybrid work and the evolution from where we have been today. And then Sheila will take us home talking about the role of inclusive wellbeing and why that's so important. We'll then follow up with any outstanding questions at the end of the session. So what are some of the statistics? What are some of the trends we're seeing today? Well, there are 3 billion digital workers worldwide that have all had their professional lives totally disrupted. 1 billion of these are what we'd call knowledge workers, so it could be viewed as our more traditional customers for WebEx and that side of Cisco. But equally, there's 2 billion field and frontline workers, and these people have to come on this journey as well. They're critically important for organisations to function, for governments to run, and countries to thrive. And when you look within your organisation, every single functional area has also been disrupted, so they're all going to need their own flavour of hybrid work to be successful. And at the heart of every one of these is the importance of culture, so we speak a lot about that today. And when we talk about hybrid work, what is our definition? What do we mean by that at Cisco? Well, we're talking about the freedom of choice and the autonomy to work from anywhere, but do your entire job from any location, be that at home, in the office, or anywhere in between. And we know that 77% of employees want to embrace this more flexible work style. But it is going to be harder to adjust to. Why is that? So if we go back 2 years, there was consistency. For many organisations, people are in the office day in, day out. For the last 18 months, there has also been consistency because for many organisations, everybody has been working at home and remote working. However, moving forwards, you're not going to have that consistency. You'll have some at home, some in the office, some somewhere in between, and they still all need to be able to thrive and work with each other. So if you start with collaboration as an example, let's take meetings. So in the past, 8% of meetings had at least one remote participant. Moving forward, that's going to be 98% of meetings. That's almost every single meeting. And that remote participant or participants needs to have the full inclusive experience to collaborate as if they're alongside their peers. When we think about the physical office, in the past, workplace design was around individual workspaces. Spaces designed for individual head-down work in many occasions. Moving forward, people are only going to go into the office for social reasons, for the richest levels of social collaboration with their peers. So the office needs to become focused on collaborative workspaces. And 87% of your peers in real estate are looking to make changes to their real estate strategy in the next 12 months. Wellbeing is a topic that's hugely important to us at Cisco. And in the past, I could just look across the floor and see the team. I could read their body language. I could look at how they're interacting with one another and get a gauge of how they're doing on that particular day. Obviously, moving forward, that is going to be much harder. So we need a more proactive engagement to doing that, and we will speak about that. And to be successful, we need to bring together people, places, and technology. And it really focuses on 5 things. You need an inclusive experience, which provides equal experiences for everybody, wherever they may be. You need a flexible experience that supports choice and employee autonomy. You need a supportive experience that focuses on safety, empathy, and well-being. A secure experience, which is private by default and secure by design. And for your IT colleagues, they need to manage this new way of working. So they need a frictionless way to administer hybrid working. What we're going to move on to now is our first Slido poll, where we want to understand how you're working today. So let's have a look at that. Got more than half hybrid work, very aligned to kind of what we're doing internally within Cisco as well. Many still working fully remotely. We have attendees all over Europe to this session today, so obviously different countries are in different phases at the moment. I'm getting a bit of a run on mainly work from the office, about 7%, and 4% allowing some kind of choice. So yeah, very much aligned to kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So for those of you that are already hybrid working, how we can keep driving that further and maximise the success. For those which are thinking about it or still at home day in, day out, as you start opening up and inviting people back into the office to have more of a blended experience, we'll give you some key steps and practical actions you can take for that. Before we move on to the next speaker, we just have a second poll to look at your key insights you'd like to get from today's session. So drop in the key things you're looking for, and we can ensure we focus on these areas as we go through the content today. So I'm seeing strategy, technical setup, engagement, flexible working, health and well-being. 100% going to be speaking about that a lot. Motivation is a good one. Concepts. There seems to be a winner in the middle of these survey results that people want to talk about. So what I'm going to do while those responses keep coming in, I'm going to hand you over to Adrian Brunner, that's going to move on to the next section of today's topic, which will be looking at what we've learned over the last 18 months from a company that was already very mature in our approach to hybrid work. Over to you, Adrian.
Super. Thanks a lot, Mark. And welcome as well from my side. And first of all, it's great to see so many people joining that session. It really shows us the relevance of the topic, but as well the interest to exchange, share, and learn from one another, which I obviously like a lot. The other day, I had a discussion with an HR colleague or with some HR colleagues from different industries about remote work and hybrid working. And those colleagues told me, well, you, Adrian, working at Cisco, I mean, you don't have to bother about all these topics because you're working for a tech company. Your people are open to this kind of change. They're used to agile collaboration. And obviously, with WebEx, you even have an own collaboration tool. So there is absolutely no reason for you to worry about it. You're best set up for the future. And potentially, some of you might think the same way. And partially, you might be right. Yes, we experienced and allowed flexible work already for quite some time and quite successfully. So we are for sure in a good position. Nevertheless, I have to say, we are as well like everyone else on a learning journey. And obviously, there is a huge difference between the previously kind of rather unstructured flexible work we used to have at Cisco to the complete remote work experience during the pandemic, and then the considered hybrid work for the future. When the pandemic struck beginning of 2020, Cisco shifted, like most other companies, almost overnight to complete remote working, which is, by the way, still the case for most employees at Cisco at this stage. And obviously, we were able to move or to switch into remote working because of our technology, and this was done or went quite well, which was great to see. Nevertheless, the unprecedented scale of that shift and as well the duration raised as well at Cisco questions around how do we ensure productivity, how do we ensure engagement, connectivity, and how do we keep the people motivated within the organization. And we kept monitoring it closely in order to be able to react to the situations, keeping in mind that there was a lot of uncertainty to consider, and as well fear and different challenges, personal challenges that people were facing during the period of time. And by the way, they still are, because still taking into consideration the riot in South Africa or the flooding in West Germany. So there are still kind of situations where we really leverage or where we're facing some challenges. From a workplace point of view,
did you want to share some slides, Adrian?
Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute.
Perfect. Just checking.
Yeah, sure. So from a workplace point of view, employees were obviously missing face-to-face interaction, travel, hugs, just human connections and the loss of choice and flexibility, because you couldn't choose anymore whether you work from home or anywhere you wanted to. So it was difficult as well to stop working throughout the day without the natural commute, and it was as well a challenge we saw managing the calendar. We realized as well that traveling from A to B wasn't just kind of travel, it was really key and relevant as part of the employee experience. So we had to reflect that, for example, salespeople running or driving from one customer to the other, that was part of a process to get focused on the customer, and then leaving again, kind of digesting, reflecting, and get focused on the new customer. And this missing and then having kind of a ton of meetings throughout the day kind of increased the effectiveness, but it as well decreased the efficiency as such. And that's where topics which the leaders from
You muted yourself, Adrian.
Sorry, that's kind of a current experience. So what I have to, when we talk about insights, right? Obviously, I have to say this as well, and it does not surprise you from a Cisco point of view, but the first insight for sure is technology being a key enabler during that period of time. I mean, we appreciated the collaboration tools already before, but the pandemic really made us clear how critical they are. They really helped us to have an interaction, to stay connected within the company and within leaders, teams, and individuals. So keeping in mind that everyone kind of went on remote working, I have to say I was quite impressed to see that the whole technology was that robust. So we didn't face too many concerns and issues with regards to technology. So that was obviously great to see. And it was as well great to see certain technologies becoming, or features becoming, a relevant piece. Just thinking of, for example, the camera being an essential piece to show empathy, to stay connected with people, realizing how many different hats people had on. I'm sure you recall all the situations with family situations behind the screen and so on. And I had as well kind of situations, for example, where I was not happy with the performance of an employee. I reached out to the employee, and when he turned on the camera, seeing the face obviously made me realize, okay, there is an issue, and it gave me the chance to show empathy and as well to react on the individual situation. But at the end, technology is really enabling the collaboration, but I'm strongly convinced that at the end, the culture determines the success of it. So that leads me to the second bit, and that's culture. At Cisco, being aware that there are so many new challenges and as well uncertainties, individual situations, we started talking about a conscious culture, really emphasizing on conscious. So it means that all employees are kind of self-aware about the environment they're part of, and that everyone feels accountable as well to and being empowered to act on it. So it was not about delegating, everyone owned it and everyone is expected to act. And as you can see on this slide, we kind of build it up on with three different parts, one being the environment we are in. The second piece, the characteristics, so kind of the culture we want to shape, behavior, beliefs, principle, from kind of the guidance given by the CEO and the leadership team. And the last piece, obviously extremely important at the end, is the experience. So the experience of the employee, the experience the employee has with the company, with interacting with the manager, the team, and the work they do on a daily basis. We kind of implemented that culture as well via many virtual rituals, and some of them might look familiar to you. Most importantly, we had the Cisco check-in that was kind of That was a monthly check-in. It was a live broadcast organized and hosted by the leadership team, which kind of gave the leadership team a great opportunity to role model and to really showcase what they understand with the culture, and kind of enabled as well a discussion on what really bothered and what kind of concerns the people really had. I don't want to go into all those kind of rituals, but just on the bottom left, you see as well some rituals introduced by HR. So HR introduced virtual health checks for all the teams, because we recognize that the danger of isolation and how people might feel with the lack of human connections. So we implemented meetings where there was no work agenda. It was just to check on people and their feeling and help them to connect, to kind of rediscuss the approach they had in the team, the rituals they had in the team, the priorities they had in the team, to really align that within the team to serve best to each and everyone in the team. And this brings me to the third leading insight, and that's leaders and teams. Work is done in teams. A big part of the individual experience and engagement is triggered by the manager and teams. And as we are aware of this big part and this magic happening in teams, we did focus on really empowering leader in teams. For some, the past year kind of remote work has been incredibly great, so they really appreciated it. For others, not so much. So we had to really listen to the people and talk within the team to ensure that everyone is kind of greatly set up and can really best unleash their potential. So while before kind of it was more the manager saying, you know, how to work and where to work, now it's more the employees having a word and sharing kind of what needs to change and how needs to needs to be set up. And so we did a lot of kind of trainings around leaders, and we had a leader day, and we introduced as well Teams Week, where we really enable teams throughout the week with different offerings for everyone or for specific teams. And we have as well the so-called engagement pulse, which you can see on this slide, consisting of 8 different questions, where we believe that those are kind of really the triggers and the differentiator when it comes to employee engagement. And that's a survey done on a quarterly basis, and this really gives the team and the leader insights about what's going on in the team, and helps the team to kind of react and to ensure that everyone is onboarded and that everyone is part of the team, and that everyone is kind of really bought into the discussion and the team serves the individual in it. This leads me to the fourth piece, and that's kind of the data insights. I already shared the engagement pulse being an important piece to really give the leaders and as well the team kind of ideas and hints, and as well the kind of the frame to have the necessary discussions within the teams to fuel team engagement. And in the middle, you see a real deal survey. That's kind of it's a survey consisting of quantitative and open text questions, which are sent out to representative sample of Cisco employees every quarter. So everyone gets asked like once a year, but Cisco gets insight on a quarterly basis. And this gives obviously great insights about what's going on, because we can every quarter kind of focus on one specific topic. And this helps us and the leadership team as well to realize kind of what's going on in the organization, and gives us the chance to react on it and to offer specific kind of tools, support, or change any rituals in kind of to favor or to support the team. And voice of the employee, that's kind of a new technology to identify meaningful themes and emotional context from real time. So like free-form text. So we kind of analyzed as well the whole chats going on, the discussions going on during a global meeting, just to get as well a sense of the emotions in the organization and to be able to react to it. So To summarize, throughout the pandemic, our leaders and employees came to us, to HR, for support and guidance more than maybe ever before. And in addition, I mean, we learned before from Mark, we hear that many are convinced that remote working is here to stay, and that as well employees are expecting this kind of change to be extended, so that people expect to be able to work remote as well. So I guess this is a great opportunity and momentum for HR. Technology has proven being critical, but now in order to be successful, we do need a supporting culture. We need to have empowered leaders and teams, and we need data insights for our navigation to guide us through this change. And I strongly believe that HR can really orchestrate this, because at the end, work is not about being somewhere, it's really about getting things done. And it's about building trust and connection. And that's where HR plays an important role. And for this, I guess, HR needs courage. It needs courage to act. It needs courage to react. It needs courage to really leverage this momentum. But I think, again, it's a great opportunity for all of us to play an important role during this period of time. So at Cisco, we'll take what we've learned about our people during the pandemic and allow that now to direct us for our next step forward. And with that, I would like to hand over to Stefan, who will share more about what's going to come next from Cisco.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adrian. Really appreciate the intro. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Pleasure to have that many participants. And what I would love to share a little bit is, and actually before I go into our future view, to really start talking about how do we key up the work around how we're thinking about our hybrid world. And going to a place that where Mark started us off from, the work around what we call now hybrid world started in summer last year, where we very much got a sense that the pandemic, is probably taking a lot longer than we were initially naively thinking it would do. Looking at also, how does that change our competitive situation at Cisco? We were proud to be a workplace that offered some flexibility to employees, and all of a sudden that benefit, if you will, or that selling proposition was gone because everybody was remote. And the way we set it up was, it was really done in tight partnership with people and communities, or HR, workplace resources, or real estate and real estate offerings, and technology. So we started it off with a white paper that was really dreaming up based on employee sentiment we got early on. And basically what the employee sentiment told us was, employee generally will need the office less. They will be more conscious of what they will want to go to the office for. So that was kind of the starting point for us to really figure out, well, what does that mean, and what does a good workplace and work environment need to look like to fulfill the needs and wants of our employees? So it was a joint development. It started off as a white paper. Obviously, workplace resources staying there for a little bit. If employees are more thoughtful of what they're going into the office for, you're probably not going to go in an office when you're spending a day in global one-to-one meetings with your teams and you're sitting behind your screen the whole time. You probably think twice whether that's worthwhile your commute. So by and large, you will go into the office to collaborate, meaning you probably need more collaborative spaces, you may need more meeting rooms, you may need more technologically equipped rooms to collaborate and lead and host global events or meetings. So that was one clear thing. So it impacts the configuration and the setup of the office spaces. It also, the next piece was technology, right? What are the right tools we need to be successful in this environment? What is the technology we need so we have a seamless experience as we're moving from our home space, maybe to a coffee shop to do a few meetings, to the office? How does that create a really connected experience? You don't want to have to log on every single time you change your location, you probably need the equipment, you need probably noise canceling headsets, so you're not going to be picking up the barista's voice behind you when you're working in a workshop. So it's really figuring out how do we connect those pieces together so it creates a seamless experience. But we also very quickly realized just focusing on how we reconfigure the offices and equipping our employees with the right technology without looking at how do we enhance our collaboration? What are the employee experiences we're creating? How do we need to empower leaders and teams to collaborate in a really different and more effective way? We will probably fall flat. I'd like to do a quick prompt for the next Slido question. As you're thinking about hybrid world, what are some of the opportunities and challenges you are seeing that opens up for you? And we'll come back to those insights in a little bit. So the white paper that we had initially developed together with our technology and workplace resource groups really gave us the framework of how we're thinking about that. Then as we were clicking into the work from an HR perspective, the way we started to go about that was really start with a visioning exercise with a really broad cross-functional team of HR experts. So anybody from, well, not anybody, it was a select team, but literally functional areas from employee relations to community partners to compensation to benefits leaders. Sheila was part of that from a well-being perspective, to our teams and leader practices. We pulled them all together and we really tried to adapt a bit of a design thinking and an agile methodology, something that your HR teams may be very familiar with. I think for us, that was a bit of a trial and error approach. And we started it off with a visioning exercise, and we felt that really helped us anchor on what are the big themes we need to zoom in and anchor on. And the outcome of those initial visioning exercises were we really needed to double down on becoming masterful at hybrid experiences. And we all had these pre-pandemic experiences, I guess, where you have these wonderful team meetings, everybody's in a room, except for two people that for whatever reason were not able to travel and meet up in the room, and they were connected with you through a telephone conference or a video call. And if you think back to those days, what the experience was for the participants, the ones in the room, probably a pretty good experience, right? You're engaging, you have all the connections, you read your body language, you interact and you engage. Probably a little bit of a different experience if you're sat at the other end of the line trying to just follow the conversation in the room, and then let alone trying to get a word in or your opinion voiced was really difficult. So that highlights really two things. It highlights on the one hand side, how can technology help us create a more immediate way to interact and be heard? And B, how do we think about collaboration and what are the opportunities on how we can improve on how we work together? What are the ground rules of how we're collaborating? And the goal that we have and what we're working towards is how can we create experiences in an environment, as Marcus said at the beginning, if 90% of the people at any given interaction are hybrid, that means you have some in an office, some remote. How do we create an environment and an experience where you are based does not matter and it does not impact your experience? And that's really that's a big anchoring point as we're thinking through this. We had a lot of conversations around enhanced teaming. All of a sudden, we saw our work days barely had they definitely had a beginning, but they barely had an end because it just morphed because we were stuck at home anyway and we're working all hours, and in a global environment, respecting those boundaries became really difficult. So it was all about figuring out what is the right mode of balancing those needs and wants. And then I think to make masterful hybrid experiences work, there's also a leader component in there. Some leaders probably are still very comfortable managing activities of their teams. They're maybe a little less comfortable managing to outcomes. And if you have your people and your teams dispersed, that becomes a little bit of a different motion. So it's also about thinking, how do we enable and empower our teams to make that work? We figured as we were doing this work, we were probably 6-8 months into the pandemic, we started to see that the rituals and routines for all of us are changing. The pandemic is going long enough that we're all kind of organizing ourselves in a new way. So we knew through that work styles are changing, and we needed to figure out a way of how do we adapt to that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we're thinking about that. And the last piece was, we also felt the pandemic probably had one somewhat positive side effect. It put everybody in the same boat, right? The location truly didn't matter anymore. You all of a sudden got access to meetings and conversations that otherwise you probably might not have had, because you were not in the same office. So it also, when we talk about inclusive connections, we're also really thinking about how does a hybrid working environment actually help us to become an even more inclusive environment, an even more inclusive employer, and what are the opportunities that hybrid will give us to further our agenda in that sense. Jana, quickly come to you to see if we have some outputs from the opportunities and challenges that the participants have shared. I think a wider area of talent and collaboration, that exactly is probably one of the opportunity areas we're seeing. Agile ways of working, I agree. In personal experience, if your organizational teams don't have that muscle, it sounds great. It takes a little effort to get people to be comfortable with the approach. So you need to train up a little bit on the methodology. Creativity, I agree. I'm trying to see what are some of the challenges. I think one at the bottom was, how do we motivate people in a remote working environment? And I think there is absolutely something there around how do we keep the connectedness going? How do we keep that sense of belonging going in a much more distributed and hybrid world? So if I go, so thank you so much for these insights. We'll try and touch on some of those as we go to the next slide, which should be coming up in a second. If it lets me share again, here we go. So as I said, these were the 3 big anchoring themes that we had developed as part of the ideation work. And what that then informed was really our hybrid world notion. So what we are going out to our, and what we have gone out with to our employee base with is, we, in our hybrid world definition, really want to be led by employee preference. We have learned during an 18-month period, which is a long period, that work continues on in a hybrid environment, right? So, and employees have learned to adjust, to adapt. They've changed their rituals, and everybody is that much more intelligent. We've kind of been all part of that big experiment of, well, what works really well for you remotely if you're not in an office, and what are the things that are really, really hard to do when you are remotely, and where you benefit of being together face to face in an office setting. So one of the challenges we have, and that we're giving ourselves, is how can we trust employees and their preferences to drive the most optimal work mode for the type of work that is happening by the employees. Of course, that is not done in isolation. It needs to be balanced with the business needs and wants. And that will lead to some tension. Some leaders very much will believe that the best motion always is face-to-face. And I think that is one of the topics and challenges that we are addressing. The way we're doing that, we did host a company-wide event, a training event, if you will, for 2 days. We called it Teams Week, where we touched on a number of those topics, from partnering to are you successful in a hybrid world? How do you avoid burnout topics, etc. And we're now turning that into a weekly ritual where we're bringing those themes back to really help educate and anchor and inspire our employees and leaders to adapt to a more flexible work environment. And of course, that all needs to be complemented by technology and the services we are using. One of the things we're saying is, everyone in our definition is hybrid. There will be very, very few people going forward in Cisco that will be literally 5 days a week in an office every single day. We will have some of those, but the general notion is we will be 2 days, 0 days, 5 days, depending, right? It will depend on the type of work that we will be doing. So what we've done, accepting that everybody's hybrid, it's also about what are the right collaboration rituals and leader capabilities we need to develop. And Sheila will be talking about that in just a little bit. The second thing was we are very thoughtful about our office return approach. We didn't want to move too fast. The concern we had if we open our offices immediately back up as the medical situation or the health situation would allow, people will default back to what they knew of what it was before the pandemic. And we're not allowing for that anchoring and reflection period where we're actually saying, well, it is a bit of a new world. Let's bring the best together from the experiences that we've had working remotely in the past 18 months, blend that with the learnings of what doesn't work so well remotely, so we have a much more thoughtful approach of how we're coming back into the organization. And then it's all about ongoing learning. What we found is we had a couple of scope definitions throughout this project, and we had to adapt it quite a bit because we got new insights and new problem statements. So one of the areas we're looking at right now is, are our policies and practices really fit for hybrid? So really putting them on a test stand, if you will, to see what needs changing to enable a hybrid environment. How do we continue to advance connectedness and do that by pushing also inclusion? And then the last point, and then I'll be handing it over to Sheila, is how do we maintain and improve the well-being for our employees, not just physical, but emotional. So we are able to really create a sustainable environment where people feel they have a home, they are connected with their partners, we get work done, we have an exciting environment. And on that, Sheila, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Appreciate it, and it's wonderful to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be answering some questions, so please pop those in the chat or the Q&A when you get a second. And I think that my friend Jan is going to share another Slido question in a minute for you to answer, and I'll come to in a second to get your inputs on that. But thanks so much for what you've been sharing already. I mean, at the end of the day, our people are the most important asset from a perspective of how we are going to get the work done in this world today and in the world of the future as well. And Stefan, thanks so much. I mean, the collaboration that we've had across people and communities in different areas that we actually work in has been so important. But as you said, also across other functions within the business, our workplace facilities team, our technology and collaboration teams, we're all coming together to ensure that we can actually understand what our people need and provide the best possible experience right now, today, because guess what? Today is different to tomorrow. We don't know. And we're all having to make decisions in the moment, which can be hard right now. But really thinking about how do we come together to make the best possible decisions. And I know this is a busy slide and I'm not going to talk about all of it, but I want to share this because one of the things that we came up with, if you like, with dynamic teams coming together, by the way, and really working together to think about what is it that our people need, is they need guidance, they need help. Nobody knows how to figure this out, nor do we, by the way, either, but we want to help. So what we're putting together are collaboration commitments, which is what we expect our people across Cisco to think about and do every single day. And we break them down into individual commitments, leader commitments, and team commitments. And I'll just pull out a few. We want people to think about, as an individual, I will hold myself accountable to be bold, to be curious and respectful. It's the sort of thing we want people to be thinking about. As a leader, I respect and I am inclusive of each other's employees' needs and boundaries. So as a leader, you're thinking about that. How am I being respectful of employees' needs and boundaries. And we're asking as teams when they come together something like, we understand what we achieve matters more where and when we work than where and when we work. So it's not about the where we're going to be working and when we're going to be working, but it's about the achievements. And by the way, I was talking about this just recently. Celebrating those successes and those moments of success is just so important for our brains to feel positive in this rather challenging world that we live in today. And some themes that we're hearing from our people, we have regular check-ins, as Stefan, Mark and Adrian have all talked about, with our people. And guess what? There's a whole world of experience and feelings that people are having right now, as you all know, and I'm sure you're all experiencing today as well. Everything from calm to happy to disconnected to concerned, overwhelmed, frustration, all of these things going on for people. And guess what? You feel like that now, and later today you might feel different. So it's also understanding as an organization and as an HR function, you know, how are we thinking about our people? Different people need different things at different times. And how do we help our teams and leaders understand that so we can get the best possible work done and be conscious of it? So as we think about our holistic approach for wellbeing at Cisco, which it really is a holistic approach, that's what I've always been passionate about. You know, we think about, we do great things for our communities. We're the #1 great place to work, which is wonderful, great accolade to have. We give back to our communities and we talk about an inclusive future for all. We have a conscious culture, which Adrian touched on, which is a wonderful thing that we bring to life. Feel like you belong somewhere. It's being aware and inclusive of one another, and it's having a safe place to talk. And we have a very big focus on leaders and teams, as you've probably heard throughout, living our principles every single day, living our collaboration commitments every single day, building trust with one another, strengths and values. And we have to focus on the individual total well-being. What does this mean? It's taking accountability for your own well-being. It's also caring about others' well-being. It's building resilience, and it's dealing with life's challenges. At the end of the day, that's what well-being is. It's how do we deal with everything that's happening in our everyday life and the things that come at us and the resilience that we build to be able to deal with those. We talk about our physical, emotional, social and financial well-being when we talk about well-being at Cisco, and we think about the offerings that we have in all of those areas. So Jan, I don't know if we've got a few results popping in around what people have been doing on the offerings, if you wouldn't mind just sharing for me quickly. More time for me, I'm going to touch on that, and a day for me, I'll touch on that too. Remote being taken seriously, and yeah, hopefully you heard from Stefan that it has to be taken seriously as well, because you know the hybrid world and the future of, well, we don't even know what the future is going to be, let's face it. So the hybrid world right now and what it's going to look like, we have to be considering. I love that somebody's popped in the EAP, Employee Assistance Program. That's great. I think we made changes to ours as well, increasing the number of counselling sessions that people can have, because realising that was a need that we had. So thank you, Jan. I'll go back to sharing my screen now, if I can flip to that, hopefully. Here we go. So at the end of the day, as we're looking at this changing world that we're living in, one of the things that I feel really, really passionate about, and I think something that we need to be taking to the executive board and all business leaders, and this is something I'm sharing with ours at the moment, we cannot have sustained productivity if we ignore well-being. So therefore, it means we have to enable the well-being of our people, because that will ensure sustainable performance and drive engagement. And what I'm talking about is the way that we're working. As much as the pandemic, there's been many positives that have come out of it, and there's huge negatives and impact that people have been suffering from and dealing with. But at the end of the day, we have to think about what we're doing every single day for our people. How do we ensure that they have this conversation around well-being? Because it's tough right now. People are ending up with meetings, more meetings than they ever had. And the other ways of working is so difficult for some of you who might be listening today in the environment and the business that you're in as well. So people are having to deal with so many different decisions, and we have to make that a little bit easier for our people. Some of the things that we've been doing, and many of you will be, I'm sure, as well, but as we've talked about, we have regular kind of communication and check-ins. I mean, the photo here is important to me. This is our CEO, Chuck Robbins here, but it's not just him. Look, he's got his, granddaughter on his lap, and it's about bringing your whole self. We got to learn so much more about our senior executives by them being more real, by being at home these days. And I think we've got to know everybody much more as we've engaged in a different way and had to learn different ways of working and socializing and working together. We had reassurance from wellbeing experts. We brought in many experts to come and talk to us. And one of the things that we did is had time with doctors, bringing in doctors to actually help people navigate the pandemic and the issues that were going on. And now we have doctors coming in to talk about mental health. What are people doing to enable and ensure that you're having those conversations, watching out for the signs of how people might be suffering, and then what do you do about it? Regular personal and professional collaborations is really important. So often within teams, we ask people to think about, before you kick off the work discussion, ask people what one personal thing is going on for you right now, and what professional thing might be happening for you now. So top of mind from a personal perspective and professional. I'll come to a few questions that you could easily ask within your teams just in a moment as well. And then this was saying about permission to put home life first, but the really important to me is people feeling like they have the permission to put their home life first, because I think what happens often for people is they basically think, well, I feel guilty if I take time to go for a walk, to do a workout or whatever it is in the day. So we have to ensure that leaders are providing that space and they're role modeling what that looks like from a permission perspective to put home life first. Each and every one of us are really, really important, and each and every one of our employees are really, really important. They have to put themselves first in order to be able to get the work done. And the more we do that, the more we'll get sustained productivity, the more we'll get the engagement that we all want as a business, and then the business outcomes will just naturally follow. Regular check-ins. So a manager and a team member, or a teammate and a teammate checking in on a regular basis, whether that's an official format that you might have on a weekly check-in perspective, something that we have, and sharing your boundaries. What are those well-being boundaries that you have? If you don't share, nobody's going to know what they are. So really encouraging those discussions where you're talking about what's important to you and work perspective, but also a family and home perspective as well. I saw a lot of in the initial Slido we did, people were talking about the difficulties between work and home life, and it is a challenge, but it's about setting those transition times, I think, throughout the day and sharing how you do that. I've learned from loads of people about how people are doing that transition time. Now you don't have the commute anymore, perhaps. But really being deliberate about that differentiation between when you're connected to work and when you're connected to your home life and your family and friends. And then days for me, somebody mentioned that. So we've had a number of paid days being given to people to take time off to replenish and recharge away from work. We've done that on a global basis. And where people can't take that specific day, if they have a customer meeting or something like that, we've said to them, take another day and agree it with your manager. It's important for us all to disconnect, encourage people to take time off and holiday. And I think we have another Slido question that I'd love to just pop up if we can. Thank you very much. And I think we've got a few questions coming in the chat as well, which will come to Mark to help answer in a moment. This is what's important to me, because at the end of the day, something that I've found over the past, well, I've been at Cisco for 21 years, but over the past 6 years working deliberately in the wellbeing space, I found that I was really pushing at the executives and the business leaders to say, wellbeing is really important. Can we come and talk about it? They were like, yeah, it's really important, but we can't quite fit it into the agenda. Well, guess what's happening now? I'm being asked loads and loads to come and talk about wellbeing and how are we building it into our new hybrid world strategy, and how does it fit within everything that we're doing as a company. So I'm really delighted to hear that, and I'm really pleased to see that the majority are showing here that they do have the executive team sponsoring wellbeing. And if you don't, just think about the terminology around enabling the well-being of our people will ensure sustainable performance. If we don't have it on the discussion or on the agenda of the business strategy, we won't be able to deliver what we need to from a business perspective. So, and there's tons of research out there that shows that, but sometimes they need some research, they need the data and all of that as well. And it's difficult for people to understand, well, what does it mean to focus on well-being? So again, just really making it simple, clear, it's having the conversation, it's building it into everyday life, it's building into all the things you do with leaders and teams. Thanks so much. I'll just pop back because there are 3 questions that I have found really impactful to help leaders, teams, everybody start wonderful conversations. And unfortunately, I can't interact with you all, but I would love to, because I know that we'd hear a lot from some of you even today about what one small change have you made recently in your life that's had a positive impact for you and your family. You could just set up a team meeting and start off with some of these questions. It's not difficult. It's like, this is us talking as human beings. What you start to learn about people is so significant, builds relationships and improves the work environment. And then you can talk about what's getting in the way of you focusing on your own well-being, so you can actually be there to support one another. And a really important question I want you all to think about today: when is your next break from work to rest and recharge? I've just had a few days off. I couldn't travel. I love to travel, but I stayed here at home and I rest and I recharged. It is absolutely critical we think about doing that. So I hope some of this has been helpful. And Mark, I'd love to come back to you because I think we've got a few questions that I saw popping in. So I haven't been able to keep an eye on them, but hopefully you can help me with that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Sheila. And that's actually why I've been looking at my laptop. I have been paying attention, but I've been looking at the questions as well. And on your 3rd question there, I have some days off next week to rest and recharge, but that's because schools are finished. So I'm not actually sure how much rest I'll get, but I will not be working. So that'd be awesome. So there have been a few key questions that have come in. I think I'm going to take the first question to you, Stefan. So what is the balance in our efforts between establishing an ideal workplace for our employees and the support for your management teams in a new ways of work? And you're
that is such a big question, right? I think I would start with what the expectations you're setting of how do you actually collaborate and work together. So the slide that Sheila quickly touched on in really defining what does good look like for how we show up as employees, what can we expect from the company and what are we giving in return? How do leaders need to show up? And frankly, how can we probably empower teams where the actual work gets done more to define what is their optimal way of working together? I think that for us seems to be kind of the winning formula. And yes, I think there's another question around maturity of people are people, some people abusing maybe the system, etc. I think the more we can delegate the authority to really have teams be accountable on how they get the work done, how they want to organize themselves, they may well come up to say with rules, right? To say, okay, 1 day a week, we want to do whiteboarding and we'll do all the creative stuff. It benefits all of us to be in the same place. So let's make that the rule. But then we're okay, maybe the other 4 days a week to just work remotely. So I think it's allowing for those dialogues, but also setting kind of the expectation and the framework for your company and that fits your culture on where you are is probably the winning formula. And I do think assessing how do our leadership behaviors, how are you thinking about leadership? Is that still current? Do your practices and principles still support where you want to go? Or is there a subtle behavioral change that you want to institute? Pretty broad answer.
That's a good answer, and I think helping people find their own natural rhythm across their teams is which really unlocks the value of hybrid work. And I'm sure I bore many of my friends when we're talking about, oh, what are you going back to the office? What's happening at work? And I have this incredible experience, which is very different to some of them. So it's an interesting dialogue, and everyone tries to find their feet moving forwards. A second question that's come in. We have quite a few questions. I'm just trying to cherry pick because we've got 3 minutes left. And I'm not sure whether this is a Stefan or Adrian question. What specific measurements have we established for the evolving ways of work?
That's an ongoing topic we're still working on, quite honestly. We are actually figuring out what are some of the KPIs we want to define to see whether the way we work in a hybrid environment is successful or not. We haven't landed, I'll be very honest, we haven't completely landed on how we think about that. I do think it's got to be at the crossroads of what are people's roles? Can we gain insights of how people work, where they want to work? I think that then you'd look at utilization of office spaces. Do people tend to go in the office for the right reasons, right? If we're seeing people going into an office to literally sit 9 hours on a WebEx Teams, having one meeting after the other with another person somewhere on the globe, we're probably not living up to the promise of what hybrid world truly could be, unless a person doesn't have the infrastructure at home to do the work, right? And then that's obviously an explainable thing. And I do think there are some, and we consciously are not making this a plug about WebEx, but I love some of the insights that WebEx is now creating, right? Where you can go and check yourself and say, oh gosh, on my meetings, am I the one talking all the time, which then influences kind of some of the rituals and your own behaviors to create an environment that is a little bit more impactful. But I would say that's still a work in progress as we speak.
And if I just may add to Stefan's point, I think the employee engagement is a trigger as well. And obviously with our engagement polls, we really measure as well how is the engagement within the teams evolving. And this helped us already during the pandemic, realizing, okay, there was a time where the engagement came down, gave us as well the chance to have the conversation, to discuss necessary actions, which we can see now that you're benefiting from, and the engagement going up again.
No, great answers. I think what's really nice to call out from those is we have been working this way for a long time, but we're still learning and we're going to continue to learn. There's no stop. You need to consistently evolve, listen to the employees and understand what's working, what isn't, and refine it moving forwards. So the last question we're going to answer live, I'm actually going to bring to you, Sheila, which is around how involved have the employees been in the crafting of this kind of vision, these strategies, the wellbeing programs. And I've just elaborated the question a bit more, knowing the breadth of what you guys have been looking at.
Yeah, I think it links actually with the previous question as well, with regards to listening and insights. And Adrian talked about our Real Deal survey. So the engagement pulse is like a quarterly kind of check-in that we do with our employees, and we measure how engaged people are. And within that pulse survey, we've actually been measuring well-being as well. There's a question in there associated to well-being. And we don't just do that and don't listen to it. We actually make sure that leaders and teams are talking about the results that come out of that. And the Real Deal survey allows us to pulse people. We've been pulsing people on how they feel about returning to the office, how they feel about vaccination strategy, how they feel about well-being, are they being cared about? And in order to then, you are involving the employees in that way by giving them the opportunity to share. They also, through the Q&A of some of our large all-employee sessions, we get sentiments from them, and we really listen to the voice of the employee to think about what is it that we need to do next. It's no good us making it up ourselves, thinking about what we think everybody needs. You have to listen to the voice of the employee.
100% agree, 100%. As an employee, I very proactively fill out those surveys and share my opinions. Cool.
Sure.
So I'm just going to share my screen quickly as we draw this session to a close. I want the next slide. So, in conclusion, for what we've spoken about today, or not, because the click is not working, but that's okay. So, what we've spoken about today are 4 really critical elements for hybrid work and moving forwards with what you need to do with your workforce. So the statistics are there, anybody can read them. There's been a change. People do want to work in this new way, but it will be challenging and people need to work through that. And that's where the role of HR is so critically important alongside their partners in facilities and IT to make these changes and make them successful. As I elaborated at the end of the last session to Stefan's feedback to one of the questions, even companies that already do this are continuing to learn and refine. There's no end state. So wherever you are on this journey, you're not in a bad place, not in the best place. It's just a journey and you need to continue moving forwards. Obviously, Stefan's given you a taste of our thinking about moving forwards. What are we looking at? And you can tell there's still some work in progress in that. And then Sheila's took us home with the critically importance of employee well-being. They're your most important asset and you need to give them the tools and the experiences to thrive. And that covers people, it covers places, it covers technology and how that comes together. So thank you for joining us today. Really interesting session. We will provide the content that we can share and a recording out to the attendees. And there will be a feedback survey and please do respond to that because we will be looking for your insights on how we can provide additional content of this type, which you may find useful. So thank you very much. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Sheila, for your content and your time today. Really enjoyed it. And I wish everyone a lovely day.